Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting report. I hope you enjoyed it. Interesting answers from the interviewees. Some preferred government jobs and others prefer private sector jobs. Depends. Looks like some have fears and they want to ensure the security of their jobs. So does that contradict with our Islamic values in a way or another? I mean, you're supposed to, put yourself in the hands of Allah and work hard. And let's say, for example, no, I need job security because this is completely insured, and that is not insured. No one can secure life forever.
No, of course, I'm not that, knowledgeable in these values, but I believe it doesn't contradict. When we say job security, it means that it is not that easy that the employer could wake up and tell me, طلعت, I don't need you in the job. Thank you very much.
Right.
So I think this is the security aspect when they talk about security. Versus, again, we go back to the private sector. The private sector has goals and targets and balanced scorecard and all of this. So if you deliver, fine, you are on and you secure yourself by yourself. Otherwise, if you don't deliver, there's explanation to it. But if it continue as such, partly because of negligence and you're not really careful doing and delivering your goals, this is where the point comes, the breaking point between the employer and the employee. But I don't believe it does, contradict with the religion. I hope I'm right. It doesn't contradict with our religion value because the interpretation is different. It is not we're talking about guarantees, such guarantee of my life or insurance of my life, versus then a job security mean that you don't wake up next day as an employer and said, thank you very much, I don't need you to work for me. Yeah. So again, the interpretation, I think it's vastly different from the religion.
Right. With us is Dr. Abdulaziz Laweshik. We would like to welcome him to the program. Dr. Abdulaziz, thank you for your time. We are talking about job security and also public sector versus private sector working in this or that. A lot of people wonder whether to work in the private sector or the public sector. In your opinion, what are the main parameters? How should one decide and what qualifies a person to reach an educated decision to work in the private sector or the public sector?
Well, I think it's a very interesting issue. You probably are aware, I think yesterday the Ministry of Labor issued a statement saying that Saudization has been at the same level for the last decade or so, and that only 13% of employees in the private sector are Saudis, indicating the failure of the project of Saudization. When we did a study a few years back for the Ministry of Labor and asked Saudis why they preferred the public sector to the private sector, there were two main reasons. One was salary, and the other was job security. So obviously the perception that in the private sector there is very little job security plays, I think, against the Saudis seeking jobs or accepting jobs in the private sector, especially when the salaries are low. I think on the other hand, foreigners also don't have job security in the private sector either. It's true they have a yearly contract or tier contract, but also they don't have job security. And I think that really contributes to the low efficiency of employees when they don't have job security. It's very important to establish, as you call them, the parameters of job security. And the most important part of it is a transparent and consistent legal system that will protect employees if their employer violates the contract or the employer takes decisions they don't like. Because I think it's important to have that legal system. Unfortunately, ours is very limited. It's good, but it's very limited in scope. Very few workers utilize it, and some of them are not even aware of it. And I think we have to, the Ministry of Labor has to do a better job at publicizing the legal procedures that they have in place, the what they call the labor dispute committees. They're in every major city in Saudi Arabia, and there is also an appeals process for their decisions. But it's important to publicize that, and it's also important, equally important, to provide legal advice free of charge, because most employees, whether Saudi or foreign, cannot afford the services of lawyers.
Excellent. Dr. Abdulaziz, now, is the direction or the drive now towards more privatization as far as the government is concerned?
Yes, definitely. I think you see that in the privatization strategy that the government has adopted a while back. And they have identified, I think, about 27 priority areas. But you're right. I mean, that's now the policy of the government, as it should be. And one of the things that are mentioned in the privatization strategy was to make sure that Saudis, either who work in these public enterprises before they are privatized, or new employees, have a fair chance at getting good paying jobs in well-paying jobs in these privatized enterprises. And so it's important to make the safeguards, and one of them is job security. Obviously, job security, there is a downside for it, to it, in that if employees think that job security means they can never be fired, that they can never be disciplined, that's also just as bad as if we don't have any job security, because that's bad for efficiency. Yeah. It makes them less attractive to employers, but also it makes them less productive because they think they cannot be fired, they cannot be disciplined. So I think you have to strike the right balance, and that's the job, I think, of the Ministry of Labor, to strike that balance, to protect the rights of workers, but at the same time without jeopardizing efficiency of enterprises, without jeopardizing the right of employers to discipline their workers.
Right. Now, my last question to you, Dr. Abdulaziz, is what is your advice to the young generation and those who are about to graduate? What decision, how can they make an educated decision or the right decision whether to work in the private sector or the government sector?
Well, definitely there are better chances in the private sector. No, there is no question about it. The jobs are more interesting. It's true, you work harder, but you learn also a lot more than the government sector. You're more challenged in a private sector job, and I think that's especially true in professional jobs. Lawyers, for example, if you graduate with a law degree and you go directly to a government job, that's really a dead end for you as a lawyer. And so I think it's important to sharpen your skills in the private sector. Maybe accept, longer hours and accept lower wages in the beginning, but you will be rewarded at the end by higher wages or better experience that will provide you later with higher income. So I think it's important for them not to follow the traditional advice that first, second, and third choice are government jobs. And you take private sector jobs only if you have to, and only if you have searched and tried all kinds of ways to get a public job, and then you settle for a private job. That's not the right attitude. I think it's important to come into the private sector knowing not as a temporary place, not as a parking place until you find a government job, but for the long haul. And I think that's important to show the commitment to your employer, and also accept that you will make mistakes, and it's the right of the employer to also take action to protect his interests or her interests.
Right. There's also one last point, the Riyada initiative, or all the initiatives that help young people to be successful entrepreneurs and depend on themselves and start their own businesses.
Yes, I think that's another. Actually, that you have job security as long as you make profit, but that's different. I think usually job security associated with jobs, that you get salaries for. But entrepreneurs can be secure as long as their projects are successful or profitable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdulaziz Laweshig, an economic expert. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. طلعت. I think very interesting points Dr. Abdulaziz highlighted and talked about. The issue of legal advice, I think, is quite interesting. To get advice, not only legal but also professional advice, before you make a choice or go into a career or a particular company. That's quite important, isn't it?
Well, I think it very much depends on the interest of the person.
Sure.
If the person wants to work very hard to earn a better salary than in the government, to progress, if you will, to be trained, skilled, skillful.
Have a future plan.
Future plan. Yeah. So this is the right place for you to go private.
Yes.
Especially, and I agree 100% with what Dr. Abdulaziz has said, that we are going towards, we are encouraging privatization. We are a member of the WTO, and the WTO simply calls that the government focus on national issues like security, for example, public services, but while leaving the private sector to the business people, to the business entrepreneur or business people to manage the economy. Yes, while the government puts the regulation, but the rules, blah blah blah, but the managing of it really goes to the private sector, as I mentioned, and we should really encourage private sector to contribute more to the GDP rather than relying on the oil or relying on the public, if you will, public contribution. This is one. So I believe the right way I see it is to join the private sector for the reason that we have cited. But maybe I would say maybe at a later stage, a couple of years, you may shift to the public sector, because it's nice to see that shifting back and forth. You work for the private sector, you go to the government, and you may come back. Now the reason when you have this nice mix, a nice going back and forth, also that will affect the public sector and let the public sector be operated in a business sense. Exactly. Yes, it is indeed, it is a public sector. I do appreciate the fact, but it has to be managed in a private and commercial sense.
You can elevate the standards, and have better work environments and
time of value,
yeah.
Goals, objective, balanced scorecard, plans, editing plans,
accountability.
This is accountability, responsibility, and this is really goals, and this is what we like to see tomorrow, whether being the public sector in case A or otherwise accountability, and as you mentioned, this kind of measures, KPIs that we use in the private sector, which I'm not saying that they are not used in the government, but definitely they're not as used as and focused and emphasized as being in the private sector.
Right. Now,